So I've been playing Broken Age. Yep, Act 1 of Double Fine's famous/infamous project has gone from poster child of Kickstarter to a beta in the hands of backers and reviewers alike, all the way up to the front page of Steam. Now there was a small note that went out with the beta asking that Let's Players and independent reviewers not spoil the entire plot for everyone, and that backers that were also pressed respect the embargo date of 27th of January. But that got reversed in under 12 hours. Not to say I want to abide by this blindly or anything, but I don't want to spoil the plot of a game I think is worth playing, if I can give away the entire review in advance. Call it a cop-out if you like, but at least I've got a track record. There's two playable characters, Shay and Vela, who live in very different worlds. Shay lives on a space station coddled by a motherly computer who runs him through missions which resemble the kind of games children make up entirely in their heads. They're meant to make Shay feel like a hero, but he's clearly too old for them and he craves some real adventure. One day, he meets someone who might be able to give that to him.
Having fun? Huh? Who are you? When you tire of child's play, when you're ready for real danger, come see me.
Vela, on the other hand, lives in a small rural village and is found awaiting the Maiden's Feast. She's not too excited about it, given that the feast is for a giant village-eating monster named Mogchothra, who's graciously agreed not to destroy everything smaller than him in exchange for getting to eat specially chosen young girls, and, as you've probably guessed, Vela is one of those chosen.
Surprise!
She has ideas that involve less getting eaten and more Mogchothra getting dead, much to the chagrin of the town's traditionalists.
So why don't we just fight Mogchothra?
Silence! Talk like that could ruin the Maiden's Feast. If you destroy the feast, Mogchothra will destroy this village, including your family. Is that what you want?
No.
Since this part of the game would be ridiculously short otherwise, she does in fact escape the feast and finds herself in lands unknown. Well, I say lands. Once you're actually in the game, the first thing you'll probably notice is that it's really damn pretty. Not bump mapping, ambient occlusion, 16 times anti-aliasing pretty, but just pretty. The art style is vaguely like that of a painting or a storybook, and it has a to hell with physics attitude to character proportions that suits the quirky nature of a Double Fine game perfectly. Besides, you tell me how a flying jelly jailbait eater's character proportions are supposed to look. It's not enough to see screenshots though, you have to see it in action. Hell, it might not make sense until you actually have control over it. On top of that, the cutscenes and conversations give you multiple camera angles, the screen zooms in and out depending on where you walk, lights turn on, lights turn off. It makes a lot of games in the genre look pretty static by comparison. It's immediately noticeable, and it makes you wonder why none of the other new point-and-click titles coming out thought to do something like this. And perhaps this is something that only appeals to me, but on my 4-year-old laptop that sounds like it's going to go into orbit if you open so much as Word, this ran really, really well. It actually runs at half speeds to save battery power when it's not plugged in. So I unplugged it for an experiment. No difference. No difference. Ran exactly the same speed. Deponia, you have no excuse. On to the interface, which is kind of important if you're using it for 100% of the time you spend playing a game. Now, I thought I was being a bit draconian when I insisted that a 2-button mouse interface was all a point-and-click game needed. Broken Age is 1-upped, the down-up. It's got a 1-button interface. And it works. Kind of impressive they've managed to make that playable, and it would have made Mac gamers quite happy 10 years ago. That leads to my only gripe, however. To use items from your inventory, you have to click and drag them. I would prefer to be able to click on an item to grab it, then click on something else to use the item and not hold the mouse button down in between. But when you've chosen a 1-button system, I don't really see a way around that. It's a bit of a pain if you're on a trackpad instead of a mouse, especially so if your left mouse button on your laptop doesn't actually quite work and you have to hammer it to get it working. You know, that's my problem, not the game's. Anyway, in addition to the 1-button interface and an open source engine, they're pretty well set up to say, release the game on touchscreen devices. Just saying. One thing that did catch my eye is how the game was written. The setting is still as quirky as you'd expect from the team that brought you Psychonauts and Brutal Legend, but if you're expecting the completely zany and sometimes slightly cruel humour, for example of Day of the Tentacle, You might be taken aback at first. The game is still funny for the most part, but it has a blunter edge to it than you might be used to, and the story is always what stays in the spotlight. Even if the idea of a supposedly civilized village celebrating the sacrifice of their young is just a teensy bit messed up. Thankfully, the story and world are interesting and fun all by themselves, but the two live in harmony in quite the seamless fashion. Shay's deadpan stare as he sits on a roller coaster he outgrew several shirt sizes ago still gives me a chuckle. Oh, and on the subject of story and humour colliding, can we just talk about how freaking adorable those little maintenance guys are? I want them. I want all of them! Sorry, momentary lapse. I've always viewed Kickstarter projects as the equivalent of finding a 20-quid note that you left in an old jacket. You're down money when you put it there, but it's a nice surprise for another day. Of course, that relies on you not thinking about it in the meantime, but I had the Double Fine Adventure documentary to keep me occupied until then. Totally worth backing just for that, by the way. Anyway, I'm just glad it's finally out, and I'm doubly glad that it turns out Tim Schafer hasn't lost touch with a genre he hasn't visited since 1998. Okay, technically there was Hostmaster and the Conquest of Humour in 2009, but that's a browser game, I don't think it really counts. In conclusion, if you've ever played a game just because Tim Schafer worked on it, you've got the right mentality for this. Of course, you've probably already bought or backed it. Everybody else should expect an expertly made game that I think I can imagine anyone enjoying. Anyone who wants a humorous game, anyone who wants puzzles, anyone who wants a laugh while they're doing puzzles. It's got you covered, that's what I'm saying. Now, there was a small note that went out with the beta asking that backers yes, Double Fine's infamous /Schafer. Yes. Yes.